Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Germinator. It's been a while since I did one of these in hybrid, so thank you for suggesting this to see if we can level up our game here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alon Eisenstein. I'm an associate professor of teaching and technology entrepreneurship and professional development at the School of Engineering. It is a pleasure to have Stephanie Gnissios with us today as my guest for this quote unquote fireside chat like conversation. And we're going to talk about building impactful ventures in climate risk and resilience. Before I introduce Stephanie, I do want to begin by first acknowledging the land that we are sitting here, which is the Syilx Okanagan Nation ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory. And I always like to point out that to my students and to guests, especially those who are new to the Okanagan, that the word Okanagan is actually the wrong word. It is a mispronounced word where the Syilx language, in Syilxchin, the word should be Sukanakin, which means taking to the top or running to the top, which is part of this idea of thinking of the Okanagan as a living space for people to find each other and I don't want to say managing risk, but responding to risk. And so the word sukanaken in Syilxchin comes from this idea that during the harvesting and the gathering season, spring and the summer, the indigenous Syilx people would scatter all around the territory to care for the land, to cut trees, to build, to hunt, to gather fruits and vegetables and roots. And those who would do that work usually would be young, healthy adults. And the young kids would be staying behind with the elderly, with the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents. And so somebody would have to be able to get word to those young adults that their presence is needed back in the settlement, in the village. And so that was the Sukanaken. And so the story of the Okanagan is when the settlers first came through, and they met the local inhabitants, the Syilx people, asked, "Who are you?" And the people they ran into were the messengers, the runners, the Sukanaken. And so they said, "We are Sukanaken." And that's how the Okanagan came. And if you actually look up the name, you'll find that the Okanagan has at least 12 different spellings and different ways people heard it and wrote it down, because it's an unwritten language all the way up till I think the 70s or 80s. So it's a young written language, mostly oral. So all this to say, people have been responding to climate and the changing of seasons and risks and the need to make planning part of their daily habit. So I think that we'll get to that in our discussion today. So maybe a bit more about Stephanie. I have 3 pages worth of intel on you, so I'll keep it short. So let me start by saying, so first of all, Stephanie is an engineer, a UBC alumni from Applied Science. Started here in 2005, the first cohort of the School of Engineering, when School of Engineering opened up its doors at the University of British Columbia Okanagan campus, and then transferred to Vancouver. We don't hold a grudge, that's okay. And then graduated. She got a job with Eldorado Gold, Cash first. And then worked in the mining industry for many, many years. She is currently in a new part of her life as an entrepreneur, co-founder and COO of Climate Risk Services, which is a boutique climate risk advisory firm and SaaS analytics provider. And then that was founded in 2019, so 2019, just in time for COVID, just in time. And it's serving the financial sector with focus on emerging developing markets, along with corporates in mining, food, beverage, and agriculture. She has over 15 years of international experience. I have a list of some of the countries you visited, so maybe we'll ask you about that in a second. And expertise in engineering, project management, portfolio management, impact measurement, risk management, and really trying to help compel companies to incorporate social, environmental, and climate risk impact into their business model and financial strategies. Stephanie also had experience working with the Oxford University's startup ecosystem, setting up a mentoring program, serving as an entrepreneur in residence for Foresight Canada, and she is a licensed engineer here in BC, and an associate fellow of the Saïd Business School and research fellow at the Smith School of Enterprise and Environment, both of them in the University of Oxford in the UK. And she has been a fabulous guest speaker for my technology entrepreneurship class for the past, this is the third year in a row.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I just keep asking her back. And so I hope you'll appreciate from this discussion why I keep asking Stephanie back. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today. Actually, I'm going to leave this because otherwise it's going to be a big screen. So we can leave it for the duration. Oh, actually, sorry, for the recording piece, I think we need to look at this. Okay. So apologies in advance. The owl will split the screen, and you need to say something for it to show you, but we'll hopefully it'll work. So for people in the Zoom, this is the first time we're doing hybrid in a long time, and the owl allows us to then use that split screen somehow. We'll figure it out as we go along. So Stephanie, maybe kind of before we begin, kind of looking at different things that, what you said over time about your career since you graduated. I kind of told you that I found this Q&A you did with Applied Science after you graduated. Why did you want to be an engineer?
I kind of fell into engineering by accident, to be honest, and I say that with trepidation sitting in the engineering department. But when I was finishing high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I intended to go to UBC. They had a first-year integrated science program called Science 1 that brought kind of a multidisciplinary approach to science, and I thought that would be a good start. Then they opened the engineering school here as I was making my applications, and they didn't have Science 1, but they had Engineering 1. They gave it the same name. So I thought that would be close enough. And so I took it here. I grew up in Kelowna, so it allowed me to live at home an extra year and kind of before I transitioned out. So I just kind of tried it. I didn't really have a career plan or a path. And I did it, and I enjoyed it. And I kept going from there.
Okay, so the universe happened.
The universe found me. Most of my career path has been that. I was never someone who kind of knew step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most of the places I've come to in my career have been a result of a choice that was in front of me at the time, and I picked one and not the other, and that's how I've landed here.
Okay, well, we're glad that you did. And then I want to skip the first steps just to get us to where you are today, but not skipping too fast. So you accidentally ended up in engineering, and then I don't want to say accidentally, but coincidentally ended up in the mining sector because you're a mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
That was the program you're in.
Yeah.
And I think if we randomly stop mechanical engineers on our university and ask them which sector are you aiming for, mining probably not going to be the first on people's kind of front of mind.
That happened because I did the co-op program in my degree, and when you do co-op, you try everything. And I always tell students, actually, I just met someone an hour ago. I said, do co-op. You get paid, you get a break from school, but also you get to try something and see if you like it. So I did co-op program, and one of the applications I applied for and accepted me was at a coal mine near Fernie. So I went there for 8 months. So then when I did graduate and I got an accepted role at a consulting firm, they said, oh, you've had exposure to mining. You can go in our mining group. So similarly, it was not kind of a deliberate and conscious choice. I was graduating, I needed a job. Someone offered me a job and I took the job and kind of built from there.
So what was the transition? Like what did you learn about the application of mechanical engineering in the mining sector? What was the surprising part of it?
Surprising part of it. I mean, mining, although most people think of mining engineering is actually a very small part of a mining operation. Mining engineering usually refers to like the drilling and blasting of the operation. But then when you go to the processing of it, you have mechanical, electrical, civil, structural, you have all the disciplines of engineering involved. So mining is actually very multidisciplinary. So I fairly quickly moved from kind of deep technical aspects of engineering into that multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary coordination as like a project coordinator and then a project manager. So I gravitated naturally to that more interactive bridging piece. And that was a good place to start there because that is so naturally interdisciplinary. In a mining site includes really everything you could think about. So I guess it was a good place to foster that ability to be a bridge between different functions and disciplines.
Okay. And we cannot under stress the value of crossing disciplines and the ability to work with multidisciplinary teams, because that's, I guess, the universal reality of anybody these days, right?
Yeah, it's a critical function.
And then, and this is not, I don't think I saw it published anywhere, but I know this from our conversations. I don't want to say gave up on mining, but you decided to say, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to do an executive MBA. And this is after you've already hopped multiple companies, multiple locations, maybe kind of and I want to say that again, when I looked at the interview you did with Applied Science, and kind of make you reflect on that statement, you pointed out, I started in mining because that's a first job offer. I chose to stay in mining because I love being part of the industry. There's potential for opportunities. It's an integral part of the world, and I cannot agree more on that. And because I'm part of the industry, I can influence how it happens. So,
Yeah,
were you successful in influencing the mining industry?
I think a lot of that fed into how and what I do now. I did kind of reach a point where I was just frustrated and I'd moved from deeper technical into I was on supporting some construction projects in Greece, and I'd started to get pulled more into the business and strategy side and looking at like risk-based decision models for how we allocate capital across different projects. And what I observed at the time was that actually the industry and a lot of industries have a very narrow view of what goes into a decision. And in the mining industry, all the economic models I built, and I built many, assess the internal rate of return. And then there was this kind of vague, unquantifiable thing of like political risk. But actually, there's so much more that goes into a decision. We just don't acknowledge it. So I started kind of down this track of trying to build a more explicit decision-making model. I didn't get very far, but it was really insightful for me to walk that journey of what are all the things that go into decisions that businesses make that we don't even talk about much of the time. And that it's there and it's a factor, but we just don't acknowledge it. And it either influences or it doesn't, but even that should be explicit. So I kind of got frustrated with the extent to which climate and sustainability sit as this kind of floating thing on the outside that we bring in when it's convenient. And I saw it actually as something that needed to be injected into much more core decision making. So as I kind of was wrapping my head around that and trying to start pursuing that within the company I was at, I also started the MBA. And I think that was both to inform more of that business. As an engineer, they train you a lot of things, but business is not one of them. And the conversations I was having, the things I was doing, I just lacked some of that business understanding of why things were or why we would make certain decisions. So I started that, and I also used that as an exploration period to say, okay, what do I actually want to do? At that point, I just had my second child. And I kind of hit this point of if I'm going to be away from my kids 8 hours a day, then it needs to be worth it. And it needs to add value to the world. And I don't think that what I'm doing right now is my best value to the world. What does that look like? And I kind of use that to explore if businesses could make better decisions that were more holistic, I believe we'd solve a lot of the challenges we have around the world. And I think the way to do that is to use this lens of risk and opportunity to create that conversation, because we do manage risks. We don't always do it well, but we at least try. And what we're lacking is an understanding of how some of those things fit into that risk decision. So that's kind of what led me to, I explored that through some of my MBA, and kind of came to the conclusion that there was a gap that somebody needed to fill. And I'd connected with someone else through the MBA who had a similar view and a complementary background. And so we did.
Okay. So we got to a point where now you're just at the cusp of starting your new startup, which is the climate risk
Yeah.
services. before we go down the entrepreneurial path, anybody has any question for Stephanie about, again, we kind of summarize your adulthood in 16 minutes. I feel bad about that, but we kind of skipped a lot of the milestone transition steps. I don't know if anybody has any question about any of what you heard, or if anybody in the Zoom, you can put it in the chat. I can see your chat if you have any questions. Yes, please.
It's very exciting in terms of how we share some, at least at your early stage of professional life. But I can talk about that later after this step over. I was just wondering, because you had said that you had a long time in mining sector and then to work. Is that like, did you have that climate risk and resilient mindset when you were working mining sector? Was that the things that was developed through that?
No, that was developed, and I think the pieces that came together were an understanding of an industry and starting to understand how businesses made a decision, obviously in that industry, but others, and then building more of that business aspect. And I think I don't know where that came from for me. I think it was a realization over time that businesses don't make good decisions with respect to those bigger issues, that we make decisions in silos. So I think that developed, whereas my business partner will tell you that climate is his middle name, and that has always been his core focus. It evolved for me as I realized, especially as I had kids and started to raise a family, that we just need a different future for them, and how do we get that? And I thought there was a real, so first the importance of that for the future of my kids and our family. And then I think trying to figure out how to contribute to making that happen. But it evolved for me. It was not kind of something that came in at an earlier stage that I worked to get to. It kind of came out of, I guess, some of my life journey.
Any other questions? Nothing in the chat? Okay. So you're now an entrepreneur, apparently. And I was looking at, again, you've done a lot of work with the Sauder Saïd Business School at Oxford. I mean, right now you're already a mentor and engaging with the community, not just here, but globally. So maybe I'll ask it in a kind of like a double-sided sticky tape question, because you've been at this climate risk services for 5-6 years, coming to 7, yeah. And the thing that I like about the Germinator is it gives me an excuse to ask people, what were you thinking before you officially kind of announced that I'm starting this? And how long did it take you to kind of go past let's say
Point of no return.
The point of no return, but kind of the hesitance, the self restraint, saying, I need to know more, I need to do more before I can officially say, okay, we're launching. And I know the word launching is now a bit of a meaningless point at this point.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't an overnight thing for me. And I didn't have visions of being an entrepreneur. My husband's an entrepreneur. He'd run businesses, so that was kind of his thing. It wasn't mine. So it wasn't kind of an on switch. I think I was exploring as I was partway through my MBA and knowing I wanted to pivot a bit from what I was doing. I also wanted to broaden. I thought I don't want to stay just as an engineer in mining. I want a wider view. I was walking this journey of kind of how do we make better business decisions as a business community, as an industry, and kind of concluding that the way to do that was risk and opportunity. And I was exploring a dozen things. My husband and I bought this like 2.5-meter whiteboard. It was huge. It covered an entire wall. And at one point I went and I wrote on it in columns and rows all the different things I was exploring at the business school and other connections and I wrote them all out. And I stood back and I looked at it. And I said, I don't think I can do all of this. And my husband said, you can do a lot, but you can't do all of that. And I didn't know which thing to pick. I really didn't know. So At one point I suggested to my now business partner, maybe I'll like do a little bit of this and I'll do other things. And he said, no, either you're in or you're out, which was fair. But I did keep my fingers in a lot of things for a while. And I think over time, they either faded or fell away, or the business we were growing started to take more of my time. And that was amidst, at the time, my kids were like 1 and 3. So the kind of the ability to explore those things was, and I was finishing my MBA. My husband was finishing his MBA. So it was just a lot going on. And it was really kind of, so I explored that for a while, I guess, before it kind of naturally somehow moved into first position. I do remember telling my husband, if I do this, like, I don't know if this will work or not, or be a thing. If it succeeds, that will be great. And if it fails, then I think I will learn a lot. And maybe that in itself is enough of an end. So kind of with that, I think, and with an immense amount of support from my husband. We were overseas too, so we didn't have any other family around. We had young kids. We were both finishing degrees. So it was not a small thing to kind of gradually step into. But that was a bit of, so there wasn't a moment where I said, yes, I'm doing this. It kind of almost evolved to something I couldn't not do.
Right.
I had to try.
And as far as, I mean, there was a study that was done by one of my colleagues from the University of Toronto, probably coming to close to 10 years now, since he looked at who are tech startup founders. And there's a huge chunk, there was like over 30%, 1 in 3 or more, are engineers. And the most common trajectory is engineers do an MBA and then become a founder. And so it begs the question, is there a self-selection in this? Are you doing an MBA because you're predisposed to start a company and you're already thinking like a business person, thinking about businesses in that way? Or is it that you walk in kind of naively to an MBA saying, well, that looks cool. And then something happens in the MBA that then forces you or compels you to say, well, now I know what I need to do, or I have to do this way.
I'd say at the start of my MBA, I had no plans or desire to be an entrepreneur and run a business. It was not on my radar. What I did want was to be COO of a mining company. And I knew I couldn't rise to a level in a company like that without having a master's. And I didn't originally plan to do an MBA. I actually said I will not do an MBA because they're so common. I will do something else. But then in the end, as I moved to be at that level of a company, you need to have an understanding of all the other parts and pieces. And I just realized I lacked that. So for me, the MBA originally was kind of, I want to grow my career path. And to do that, I need to have a master's. My husband encouraged me to do it. My boss at the time encouraged me to do it. I said, okay, this is what I'll do. But it really was with a goal to rise up in my company or a similar one. It wasn't a goal. I was also, I mean, for the stage of my career, I was ambitious and keen, and I was constantly pushing the limits. And so I joke that I started my own company because nobody would give me a C-suite title at however old I was. So I just gave myself one. But yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know if my husband remembers differently, but I had zero plans being an entrepreneur when I started the MBA. It was kind of a year in that it was like, oh, maybe this is a thing.
So I wanna kind of look at the other side of the tape, the sticky tape. You as a mentor, because you're mentoring a lot of young entrepreneurs. Do you see anything in them that reflects back about how you were when you just started?
Vision, I think. Mentorship's important to me. It always was. As a woman in engineering and then mining, mentors were really critical for, I don't know, survival. So that kind of being a minority in something, you need to see people around you and have that input and support. So I've mentored women in STEM, and since in my first year of university, I was mentoring high school students, and that's kind of been naturally carried to where I'm at in entrepreneurship. But I think a level of ambition is what I see, and just a desire to learn and grow. And I think those are two, you have to want to do whatever it is, and you have to be willing to fail and learn and try again and fail and learn and try again and just kind of keep going. So I think I see that in most people that I would mentor in entrepreneurship, and some really incredible things that they go on and do. But it's that kind of persistence and willingness to change and adapt.
I see that in my students as well. Although as an educator, I think we have a different relationship than being an entrepreneur sitting as a mentor. You mentioned, again, going back to something you mentioned back when you were still in the mining is how much you value the diversity of people around you. And you already mentioned that mining is very diverse, multidisciplinary. You have to work with a lot of people. As you just mentioned, being a woman in mining, a woman engineer in mining, there's a very small number, relative speaking, to the industry, and being that I guess has its challenges and probably has some opportunities in some ways. But appreciating diversity and kind of leveraging that, how have you found that experience inform who you are right now as a founder, like setting up your own shop with a co-founder who's a male founder, but then within the business that you're creating your own culture. How is your own experience in mining, being a woman engineer, you feel is informing how you're doing your work right now?
I think we so I think I've recognized the value of that, and I have quite a diverse team, and I have had points through building the company where we've recognized someone as quite different than us, and so that's good. We need that. My co-founder and I are very, very different people. We have some similarities, of course, we get along, but we're very, very different people, and we each bring strengths to that, and that's how we've gotten here. Is he will bring kind of big ideas and a vision, and I will make sure it happens and that there's an action plan. So we bring good complements to that, and we bring different perspectives, and we've deliberately built that into the company. And I think the culture we've tried to build around that has been recognition that diversity is a good thing, that it brings creativity. I think we've deliberately created a culture where it's okay to fail and to learn, because when you take people that are different and you put them together, there will be failure because it doesn't always work. So the value of failing and learning and failing again and learning again has been really critical. And I brought a particular view to making sure that we operate on a merit basis. We've had occasional, as a kind of leader of the company, sometimes I look at things and I go, that just doesn't sit right, and we need to remedy that. And we've been very conscious of that. I'm fortunate to have a business partner and a team that also feel that way. And that he backs that up, but that's been inherent in everything we've done, whether that's client facing, where we've had situations where people automatically defer to him. He's a male and he's older in terms of more work years. And he will go, oh, no, you have to talk to the boss. And he'll redirect that. And we've had internal issues. We hired a young man once who negotiated his salary. And a year before that, we'd hired a young lady in virtually the same role who did not negotiate. And he got a higher salary. So we sent her an update and said, congratulations, you just got a raise. Because I think those things need to be called out and remedied. So I guess my own experience, and that we've set a company that values diversity and recognizes the merit of who a person is, what they bring, and what they can do over anything else. I think we've been quite deliberate in that.
Amazing. We're halfway through, so I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any burning question, that now we're in the entrepreneurship part of.
Well, your maybe I'm not or whatever. Just like that first year, how you get into being an entrepreneur, how do you get that first contract that leads to like the next one, like how you actually start that very
And you're assuming that they had the first contract in the first year.
Yeah, for sure. Like the first year.
First 12 months. From a personal perspective, honestly, a lot of it was a blur. It was COVID. My husband and I are both finishing our MBAs. My kids still weren't sleeping through the night. So I don't know, honestly, I don't know how we did it. And I think there were a lot of where my husband would be like, hey, you go finish your assignment and I will do the kids because I was like, I don't know. So from a personal perspective, the first year was a blur. From a business perspective, we decided, even though we had visions for a software product, we started with advisory because it would provide immediate revenue. And we wanted to make sure that we were building something people would use, because I thought we could go away and spend a lot of time building something and then nobody would like it. So our first contract was for WWF. We wrote a report. My business partner had a connection there. They put out a request for proposals and we said, we can write this report. And it was on adaptation finance for asset owners, climate adaptation finance. So we wrote a report. We did that and we delivered training sessions. Timing was kind of good that year, or early 2020 was when the European Central Bank put out their new guidelines on climate risk regulation. So everyone needed to figure that out. So we just started doing training sessions. We're like, we can train you on that. We can train you on that. And then we also, again, through my business partner's network, we got a contract through basically a friend of his to do a climate risk assessment for 2 real estate assets that in the company that he ran. So those were kind of pieces we pulled to start figuring it out. But I very clearly remember at the end of the first year, so December 2020, because we started, it was late 2019, so there wasn't much that happened in 2019. There was a public tender. We bid on the work and it was for a German development bank and we won. And it was $100,000 project. And I just remember us being like, we won, we won, we won. We have no idea how we're going to deliver this, but we won. And we ended that year with like 120 euros in our bank account. And I was like, but we have a contract and we won it on our own merit and we can deliver this. And that built a lot, because once you can say, oh, we've worked for this company, people go, oh, have you? And so the credibility we built on the first 1 or 2 contracts, combined with leveraging training sessions as a way to connect with people and follow up with them and say, hey, do you need more work on this topic? Those are what kind of started us moving.
Amazing. And I want to emphasize that you mentioned that these were all paid customers.
Yes,
to some
those
extent.
were.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, we didn't really do any. I mean, we did a lot of free work, but not like free projects. So we did. You just do whatever you can. The other big win we had very, very late that year was we did a bunch of cold emails to mining companies, because that was my business partner's background's in finance. So we're like, okay, go after finance. I'm in mining, so let's go after mining. And we got a reply, and that remains a core client for us now. And similarly, they said, oh, okay, maybe you could help us. We had a call and they said, oh, yeah, you could help us with this. And I said, great. And it was Scope 3 emissions accounting. Knew nothing about it. I shouldn't say this on camera. Knew nothing about it. Had never done it before. But I said, we can do that. And we did. And I spent how many late nights learning it and figuring it out. And they remain a core client for us 5 years later. So yeah, cold emails don't usually work, but sometimes they do. And that was our kickstart into mining, because then we had credibility with that. Could say, oh, we've worked for so-and-so. Oh, maybe you can help us.
So being bold, ambitious,
yeah,
throwing yourself out there and saying yes.
Yeah, and being relationship driven. I think that's something we've been very deliberate about, is we don't view our clients as transactional. We really build relationships, and that's built a lot of credibility, goodwill, really strong references and recommendations and referrals. So that's been a huge component, especially particularly in our financial system of development finance, where it's very, very network based.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. Just briefly, my background, I spent 35 years in international project development in local oil and gas. For the last 10 years, we've been doing social economic development and project development with entrepreneurs out of West Africa. And through this process, my interest really has been in what are the structural changes that have to occur in society in general. And I'm really interested to explore that with you, because through this process, really what we come up against is if we have an opportunity to pause and reflect, is what are the false dichotomies that we are working under? Maybe we have false dichotomies that we just don't even recognize, or that we just automatically assume what are the deeply entrenched biases that are out there, and not just those 28 standard biases, confirmation bias, but biases or prejudices that we want to, like gender bias. Oh my God, you're doing work in Africa, we're going to add another 15% risk. We have been through it all with the IMF, WWF, all of the organizations. And I'm really interested because then when we go back and say, well, how do we actually measure climate change, actual societal progress in climate change versus this tension I sense out there sometimes between what I have to say when I really believe that this is going to be the structural change versus what is bankable. There's something that's bankable that is going to get funded. And I struggle with this, like this tension between believing this, being transparent, believing that there has to be a wholehearted structural change in global north, global south trade, how we look at climate change, as you mentioned earlier, not just an add-on, that it's something that should be baked in. But climate change risk is the same as social license risk, is the same, it's related to so many other risks that we don't take granted for.
Yeah.
And I worked in large mega project, oil and gas projects. And I remember for so many years, you say, well, look, we're gonna get in a helicopter, we're gonna fly over to this First Nation, we're gonna go down and have a chat with these people so we can tick off the box about social license. And I remember just saying, no, that's just fundamentally wrong. And then years later, working in West Africa, the same dynamics is that really, my view is that the needle will change when we actually elevate a conversation to structural societal change. And I'm interested to learn how you approach this tension, because I sense that you have a visionary view about just how deeply in the human ethos climate change financing versus this hand we have to walk people along in institutions and companies along this process and hope that we can change their behavior as we go, and hopefully as a social enterprise make some money and be profitable as we go along there, but not belittling the vision, the ultimate vision. But I don't know if I've articulated that right, but it's something that is close to my heart, is that tension that occurs between. And I think sometimes, if I just add here, I think it's a form of cognitive dissonance that if we really had to admit that the whole economic order and the global north, global south order and the capital order that we're working under is, as I'll use the word, lamentably defective, and that we have to reorder it, then the cognitive dissonance, which is oftentimes very cognitively dissonant, is unconscious, is that if I accept that these are false dichotomies and that the order is defective and that we have to do something else, then everything I've based my studies on, my career on, my everything on, goes up in a puff of smoke. Because it's like, why would we want to change the social economic order in West Africa so that people could grow regenerative crops, which would fight climate change and soil and all this? Why would I support that when the whole philanthropy model says that I have this cushy job sitting in Accra, Ghana, or in Bamako, Mali, doling out funds for piecemeal social economic development projects, whether it's to the IMF or the World Bank or African Development Bank or whatever. And I think that has to go with a lot of these initiatives out of Europe, with Euro funds and different things, is that there's a lot of piecemeal here to kind of appease within the system. But the greater issue is, where do we find the courage, and how can we do it without going bankrupt and being totally ostracized and ostracized and cast out from society? And we do have to make these structural changes. So pardon me for philosophizing here, but
I will just say, and then I'll let Stephanie share that we're running a Map the System competition this year. So there's a UBCO Map the System. Stephanie as well as Gelly are mentoring the teams, and this is out of the University of Oxford Saïd School of Business. And I guess the fundamentally ask the same question as you're asking and forces students to kind of, for lack of better metaphor, swallow the red pill or the blue pill. Which one is the matrix pill that you have to swallow? But kind of wake up and realize how convoluted, complicated, interconnected the problems are, and they're not just the way we kind of, like you said, kind of piecemeal solutions do not solve complex problem. So
I think it's a much longer discussion, of course, but I'd offer two thoughts. Well, I guess my pre-thought is I think some of that order is being shaken up in current context, which I won't comment on, but I think two thoughts. One is that was part of my initial drive to start the business in the way we did, that if we want to actually move the needle, the morality argument has not worked. We know we should do better and we don't. So to my view, we have to shift from that morality argument into a fundamentally financial and business argument, because that's currently the way the world works, right or wrong. So I think that's kind of was the goal in bringing climate and sustainability or social license from this peripheral nice to have into this fundamentally changes how we make strategic and financial decisions, because we better understand the longevity of those impacts for my business. So everything we do as a narrative is driven to the impact on your bottom line. And sometimes you can quantify that, and sometimes it's more qualitative and strategic, but everything we do, we drive to this is how this will impact your bottom line and why you should make different decisions, or here's more input to your decisions. So I think that is sustainability in a broader sense. That is what we need, is we need business to drive solutions, but in a way that works for business, or they won't. My second thought would be, I think, what you're getting at, which I think is part of the challenge, is how do you work within the system even as you try to change the system? And I don't think it's easy. I think system mapping can be really useful for figuring out your own thoughts around that, but that's something we very actively do as a business as well. One of our internal core cultural values, we call it challenge the rules of the game. And we tie that to our integrity value, that we will tell clients what they need to hear when sometimes they don't want to hear it. But then we will work with them at where they're at, because they're not. And often we're working with a couple people in an organization who really know what should be different, but they have to shift an entire organization. So often we're empowering change makers in organizations by giving them that narrative of why this deserves board level attention or executive attention, because it will impact the bottom line. So I guess we work to try and work within the system, broken as it may be, even as we try to change the system. And I think that's been a lot of what we have contributed to. I would never say we've accomplished it or done it, but I do believe some of those systems are changing, at least in the development finance sphere that draws those links to emerging and developing economies, that understanding is growing, and it is shifting how things are being viewed. We're certainly not there yet, but in some respects, I feel optimistic. But certainly a longer conversation, so happy to carry it on.
Thank you. That's wonderful to see these actions being done, because they have to be done.
Yeah.
And I'll just close with saying that the fact that you're doing these actions is that step of going from unconscious ignorance to conscious ignorance. Oftentimes, you're just making, in a tactful business language way, making people aware, so they no longer can claim ignorance, and it causes a little bit of cognitive dissonance here that says, well, this is boy, I could actually be disrupted right out of business if I don't address this thing,
Exactly.
Whereas before it was just like, I'm looking backwards as how my balance sheet and profits was, I'm just gonna project forward, where, well, no, the principle of disruption says that you can be here 1 minute, a year later, because you weren't looking at what could impact you. So thank you very much.
any other questions to follow on this? Or on a different topic? Or maybe from people online? I don't know if anybody want to throw in a question in the chat. I don't think I'm seeing any chat questions. So we are getting close to the hour. So being an entrepreneur, and I think following the discussion here on how to make an impact in the climate sphere, right? And kind of when I asked you how should we call this conversation, and you suggested building impactful ventures in climate risk and resilience. What do you mean when you say impactful? What is impact to you?
For us, impact is accelerating capital allocation to climate mitigation and adaptation. So to get where we need to go in the world on climate, frankly, we need more money going to transition and to resilience. So the premise of what we do and what we work is to use climate risk assessments for banks or companies to help them understand what their climate risks are, where they sit, and then how they'll materially impact their bottom line. And our impact then is that if they understand that, they will make different decisions on how they use their resources, capital and otherwise. And what that should do is shift those resources to climate mitigation and adaptation, so reducing emissions and building resilience in. We do that with a particular focus on developing emerging markets, in part because it's a niche we've built, but also because that's where the greatest impact is. We lots of studies, and you can quote where the parts of the world that are most acutely feeling the impacts of climate change are also those that are most vulnerable and least prepared to deal with it. And there's also different levers to create change in that. So our work with development finance is through global development finance institutions and multilateral development banks, with them to allocate their capital differently, and then through them into those emerging market banks. So we work with banks on the ground in Africa and Latin America and South and Southeast Asia and Central Asia, to help them understand how this is going to impact them and help them make those different decisions too. So at one point we were looking at possibly raising funding, and we spoke to a lot of impact investors, and most of them said, "Ooh, you don't fit our impact profile because you can't tell me how many tons of carbon you've removed or you've abated." And we said, that's not the impact we're having. That will happen, but what we're doing is shifting money, and money is what will make that happen. So that's how we've kind of envisioned the impact that we do. We kind of balance across a profitable, strong, growing business with creating that impact. And then we have a third pillar we call people. Happy people is what we call it. But I think that the message to our team is we need all of these pieces. If we have a growing business and people like us, but we're not making climate impact, we've failed. If we make climate impact and people like us, but we can't pay your salaries, we've failed. If we can achieve 2 out of 3 of these, we've failed, because we need to have this. And it's been absolutely incredible, the team that we've built around that and how intensely people care about the issues that we work on. It's just always so inspirational to see our team from the top to the bottom really being at the company because they care about that impact, but they see this as a way to create that change as well.
So if you had to put numbers, and I know you're a numbers person.
Sometimes. Depends what it is.
And you showed my class a dashboard. So, but anyway, I'm kind of curious on two things, 2 numbers that you just kind of referenced to. So number one is to say how much of a business bottom line is at risk because of, climate mitigation, climate adaptation failures, right? So what is a typical percentage of a business to say, is it 10% of your business at risk? Is it 50% at risk? And I know that it's a pretty wide net. So if you need to trim it to a specific industry, I'm okay with that. But then the flip side is, if your 50% of your business is at risk because of climate related issues, how much money, because again, you're talking about the impact is shifting money into, how much money would you need to then shift into these mitigation adaptation strategies on your board? I mean, is it like a 1-to-1? Is it a 10-to-1? I mean, how do we think about that?
So part of me liking numbers means I like to figure out the numbers, and I cannot give you a number for what you're asking. It so varies based on where you are and what you are doing. If you put 2 businesses side by side and there's a wildfire, they will feel that impact differently. So depending on what they're doing. So I could not give you a number for a typical.
Is there like a ceiling? Is there like, is 100%?
0 to,
Okay.
well, not 0, I don't know, near 0 to 100%. There are some businesses that will not be directly as impacted by climate, but they will feel the effects in the indirect as their clients and their supply chain, et cetera. So I don't know, 15 to 100. I don't know. I'm making things
Okay.
up. So, but there's what's most important is that you understand that. And I can't give you a number across businesses, but a business has built that maturity if they can say, we understand, and there's regulation now requiring this, we understand how much this could impact our bottom line. And there's materiality thresholds in that, right? We'll sometimes look at big operations like oil and gas or mining and say, well, what if there was a hazard event? And they'd say, well, it would cost us $10 million, but that's not material for us. We say, okay, what if there was this kind of hazard event? So it's really the importance is taking your head out of the sand, doing that analysis and understanding the result, and then separating what you do about it. And that's the risk management piece, right? That's businesses face all kinds of risks. You don't actively manage all of them. You understand them, you monitor some, you act on others, and others you discard because they're too low probability or severity. So that's the value of our traditional risk management tools. We just need to put climate in that. With respect to how much capital we need to put, you can find lots of reports that hazard a guess at how much money we need to go into adaptation to get to resilience. But again, it just varies so much. And I think there's a conscious trade-off there. If we understand this is the risk that faces us and we understand how much it could impact us, you're at a business case for whether you invest to mitigate that risk or not. You could choose to accept that risk, or you could choose to mitigate it by investing capital. And even in there's probably 5 ways you could mitigate it. That would take 5 different amounts of capital, but would mitigate it to different levels. So it's the risk management approach of, is there a business case to invest in this, or do we just accept this risk and it might occur? But the narrative is shifting now too, to say, well, if we, particularly for the financial sector, if we understand the risks that sit in our portfolio, those are also in themselves opportunities. Because if we have a part of our portfolio that's highly exposed to flooding, that's a problem that could cause non-performing loans. But we can also then go to those clients. If we understand those risks and dynamics, we can go to them and say, hey, we'd like to offer you a second loan. And if you use this loan for flood mitigation, then you've both protected yourself, you've reduced our risk of a non-performing loan, and hey, we've sold you another product. So the narrative is also growing in maturity to say, if we understand the risks, we can appropriately manage them, and we can also draw out opportunities that we can pursue from a strategic and business perspective too. So you've got to balance. I often tell my clients that value realization is both value protection, which is the risk management, and value creation, which is that pursuit of opportunities. And you should be doing both. But most businesses are still working to get the maturity and the risk understanding, and then they need to feed that over to seeing how that brings opportunities to their business as well.
Okay. So sounds like a big order for fixing the world.
I couldn't give you single numbers. I mean, if I had them, I would, but
yeah. No, but I think, I think it's safe to say that practically all businesses are at risk of some level. So
yeah, and some of that's indirect. I mean, we work with central banks, and they're looking at the stability of the financial system as a whole. So I would say that's going to affect every business in every economy. So you can look at kind of what we call micro effects on the business itself, direct impacts, or you can look at second order and wider systemic effects to the point about systems. And that's some of the work we do at central bank level, saying, well, if there's, I mean, you can look at cases in BC recently, the wildfires, the flooding have had massive economic impacts. And if that happens too often or too much across the system, then the whole system's at risk. And you can talk about specific risk versus system risk. And you can usually diversify away from specific risks, but you cannot diversify away from system risk.
Yeah. Which is why there's like a bottom of like the 15% you said, kind of guesstimating.
Yeah.
Like there's no zero. Yeah.
Zero.
There's no zero. Everybody has a risk. So everybody should call Stephanie.
That's right. Please.
Right? Sooner or later. We are 5 minutes away from the end of this. I'm a great fan of a podcast called What's Your Problem on Pushkin Media. And the interviewer always finished with a lightning round with a few simple questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
So just a few simple questions, and kind of without thinking, just like what you once said that you read a lot of books. What was your best book recently read?
Gosh, that's not a quick question.
Just one that you recommended to somebody recently.
Oh, what's it called? What's the name of that mentor book with like 100? It's by Tribe of Mentors.
I think
it's by Timothy Ferris, and he went out and interviewed like hundreds of people. tribe,
Okay.
like a group of people.
Yeah.
Tribe of mentors. And it's these short snippets from all kinds of people, many names you'd recognize, some you don't. And it's their like mentorship advice condensed into like 3 pages.
Nice. Okay. You once said engineers shape the world. What's the thing that you think we shape the world for the better?
Did I?
Yes.
How pathetic of me. I think engineers have an inherent ability to connect pieces. And I think you need to, I guess I've observed some, well, I shouldn't say that. Not all engineers. Some engineers are well placed to be a bridge between different things. And either you can do that and connect, or you can go deep into something, latch onto a problem, and not let it go till you've solved it. I think that's something of an engineering trait. And I think when we do that, we put things into play that change the world around us. So,
Nice.
but I would have to think back to what when I said that and what I was thinking at the time.
Okay, two last questions. Number one, you were mentoring at some point, maybe you still are, a startup in Zimbabwe by Evangelista called Passion Poultry. What is one thing you learned about poultry you didn't know before?
Oh, what percentage of baby chicks die, especially in different conditions? She's actually, I should catch up with her. Absolutely incredible. I mean, everyone look up Passion Poultry on LinkedIn. Evangelista, I'm sending stuff your way. She's absolutely incredible, and I've had very little to do with where she's gone, but she's done amazing things in a very impactful and meaningful way. But I would say I did not understand the extent to which kind of
Chicks died.
smallholder farmers lose percentages of their baby chicks.
What was that percentage?
I don't remember. High,
More than 50?
50% or something.
Wow.
It's very
Oh my
high.
gosh.
But you can check her out on Facebook or on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
she'll know.
Sidetracking from poultry, you said you like to bake. What do you like to bake most?
Before I had kids, I made fancy cakes, like multi-layer crazy things. And
Ooh.
at some point I'd have a breakdown and be like, this isn't working. And my husband would talk me off the ledge, as he usually does, and I'd finish it. Nowadays, I have young children, so I bake brownies and cookies.
Okay,
That's
nice.
pretty much it.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you so much. I want to just quickly bounce back to my slide deck and use this opportunity to let everybody know that my next guest is Mark Abbott. Mark Abbott, I lost my notes. Mark Abbott, he's a PN, she's an MBA, so some commonality there. And he's also a sustainability fan, so he created multiple things happening on engineering and sustainability. He's currently the director of tech stewardship initiatives and the director of the engineering change lab. He used to be with Engineers Without Border. He was on the executive team. And so I'm going to talk to him in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What date was it? March 3rd. So I don't know how many weeks it is from now. But anyway, on March 3rd, that will be online because he's based in Ontario. So if you want to listen to my conversation with Mark Abbott, please join me on that day over Zoom. And with that, I want to thank you, everyone who attended in person and everyone who attended online. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for agreeing to have a sit down with a non-existent fireside chat-esque chat like.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.